Some cases begin with blood. Others begin with lies. This one began with a letter, delivered in a wax-sealed envelope, faded yellow with age and reeking of lavender and dust. I was halfway through my third cup of black coffee when the mail came. The envelope bore no return address, only my name in sharp, looping script. Detective Amos Lennox. The handwriting was familiar. Too familiar. I slid it open with the edge of a razor blade and pulled out the letter. It was dated July 5, 1947, exactly 25 years ago to the day. The signature at the bottom read, Margot Blythe. She'd been dead for 24. The letter was written in haste, like she knew she wouldn't have time to say more. Amos, if you're reading this, then you must have found the key, the one I left behind beneath the floor. I couldn't tell you everything back then. They were listening, watching. But if you want the truth, find the girl. Find the girl beneath the floor. M. I lit a cigarette with shaking fingers. Margot Blythe had been my first real case. A jazz singer at the Holloway Club with lips like sin and secrets like chains. She'd come to me scared, convinced someone was following her. Days later she was dead, suicide they called it. I never bought that story. And now, decades later, a letter in her handwriting tells me she left behind a key, and that a girl had been hidden beneath the floor. But which floor, and which girl? I dug through my old files until I found the one labeled MB47. The folder smelled like mildew and regret. Inside were photos, news clippings, club flyers, and one black and white photo of Margot, standing outside her apartment in a slim black dress holding a box of records. In the photo, behind her, a floorboard was slightly raised. My pulse quickened. I still had the address, 1026 Wilmot Avenue. I hadn't been there since the coroner zipped up Margot's body, but if there really was a key beneath that floor, it was time to go back. Back to the house where the song ended. Back to where the truth was buried. The sun hadn't quite set when I pulled up to 1026 Wilmot Avenue, but the house was already draped in shadows. Time hadn't been kind to it. Peeling paint flaked like old scabs. Windows were boarded on the second floor, and the porch sagged as though the house itself were tired of keeping secrets. The old Blythe place had been sold years ago, passed through a dozen hands, and finally condemned. But no one had the guts or the reason to tear it down. Until now. I stepped up to the front door, locked, of course, but the latch was weak. 2 firm taps with the butt of my flashlight, and I was inside. The smell hit first, mildew, dust, and something older, the kind of air that wraps itself around old lies. The living room was gutted. Wallpaper hung like dead skin. The fireplace was cold and crumbling, but the floor was what I'd come for. I found the exact spot from the photo, 3rd plank from the east wall. The wood was loose. I pried it up with the edge of my shoe. Beneath it, wrapped in oilcloth, was a small brass key, tarnished, warm in my hand despite the cold air. There was a tiny tag attached to it with a single word scratched into the metal. Room 5B. Upstairs. I moved slowly, flashlight sweeping each stair like it might bite back. The second floor had 5 rooms, 4 of them gutted and empty. But the 5th was still sealed shut with a heavy, rusted lock. The key slid in smooth as silk. The door creaked open. Inside, the room looked untouched by time. Velvet curtains still hung. A cracked vanity mirror leaned against the wall. In the corner, a phonograph sat on the floor like a forgotten friend. And across the room, nailed into the wooden planks, was a small iron ring, like the handle of a cellar door. I knelt. It wasn't just a ring, it was a latch. And beneath it, a seam, A trapdoor. Heart thudding, I pulled the latch and lifted. The air that rose up was dry, still, undisturbed. I shone my flashlight into the dark below. What I saw made me stumble back. There were stairs, and at the bottom of them, a shoe. Small, red, child-sized. The beam of my flashlight trembled as it crawled down the narrow staircase beneath room 5B. Each step creaked like it hadn't been touched in decades, dry wood screaming secrets into the dark. I took them slow. Halfway down, the air changed. Cooler, denser. Not damp like a basement, but dry like an old attic buried in reverse. Whoever built this room wanted it to disappear, not rot. At the bottom, the space opened into a low square room, no more than 10 feet by 10. Concrete walls, no windows, just dust, silence, and time. And there, in the corner, was the shoe. Red leather, scuffed, small enough for a girl no older than 10. Beside it lay a faded scrap of cloth, blue cotton, like a child's dress. And on the far wall, etched into the concrete in frantic, jagged scratches, were 4 words. She never left here. I stepped closer. The dust shifted underfoot, thick and undisturbed. I squatted, ran a gloved hand over the floor. No blood, no bones, no girl. But someone had been here, someone who hadn't meant to stay. The silence in that room was different than the rest of the house. It wasn't decay, it was grief. Memory soaked into the walls. I scanned the corners with my light and found something else, barely visible behind a loose panel of concrete near the floor. A photograph wrapped in wax paper. I pulled it out gently. It showed a child, maybe 9, sitting beside a much younger Margot Blythe. The girl had a shy smile, dark hair, big eyes, and a name written in pencil on the back. Clara, 1946. Clara. Margot never told me she had a daughter, or a sister. And yet here was the proof, hidden beneath the floor like a relic of something shameful or sacred. But where was she now? I climbed back upstairs, the photo in one hand and the key still burning in the other. The house creaked behind me, like it was relieved someone had finally found the name it had tried to bury. Back in my office that night, I stared at the photo under lamplight. Then I pulled out my typewriter and began a file labeled Clara Blythe Missing Person, Unreported. Something told me this case wasn't just about a murder in 1947. It was about a girl who vanished without a trace. And maybe, just maybe, wasn't gone at all. I took the photograph to a friend of mine at City Records, a man named Howard Reese. He owed me a few favors, most of them from dice games that didn't end well for him. He met me in the back of the archives building, behind shelves stacked with death certificates and old voter rolls that smelled like mildew and fireproof ink. "You ever seen a Clara Blythe in the system?" I asked, sliding the photo across the desk. Reese frowned, adjusted his glasses, and flipped through the birth records for 1936 to 1948. "No Blythes, not in this county." "You sure that was her last name?" "Margot's was. If she had a daughter, it would have been registered under that, unless she wasn't registered at all," he finished. Reese tapped the photo. "I'll widen the search, but if this girl was hidden, it wasn't by accident. Someone wanted her off the books." Back at my office, I tried piecing together Margot's timeline. She arrived in the city in 1945, began singing at the Holloway Club in 46, died in 47, which meant Clara existed for at least a year while Margot was on stage every night performing under a spotlight while hiding a child in a house with a trapdoor. I needed to speak to someone who knew Margot before the papers called her a suicide. So I went to the Holloway Club. It was still standing, renovated, repainted, and now serving overpriced cocktails to young couples who'd never heard a real jazz trumpet in their lives. But one name still lingered on the wall. Eli Smoke Mather's Piano Man, bandleader and survivor of every decade that tried to bury him. I found him at the bar, old hands wrapped around a glass of bourbon, his face like a road map of nights that ended in ash. "Margot Blythe," I said, sliding onto the stool beside him. His eyes darkened. "You a reporter?" "Worse, a detective." He gave a raspy laugh. "Then you already know she didn't jump." I nodded. "What about the girl?" He froze. "You've seen Clara?" My pulse kicked. "I've seen her photo, that's all." He leaned in, voice low. "Margot kept her hidden. Said the girl knew something bad. She used to hum songs she'd never heard, repeat things that hadn't happened yet." I frowned. "You saying she was psychic?" "I'm saying," he whispered, "that the night Margot died, Clara vanished. No one saw her leave. No one ever found her." He took a slow sip of bourbon. "And you want to know the part that still haunts me?" I waited. "She used to tell Margot she wasn't real, said she only existed when the floor was closed." He stood, dropped a bill on the bar, and walked away. I was left with the silence of a song that never ended, and a mystery that had just opened wide. I couldn't sleep that night. It wasn't the whiskey. Wasn't even the storm rolling in over the city like a fistful of thunder. It was her voice, a child's voice, soft, distant, humming an old tune I couldn't place, and the words Smoke had left me with. She only existed when the floor was closed. I lit a cigarette and stared at the photo of Clara again. There was something about her eyes, too calm, too knowing, like she understood more than the world around her. I called Reese first thing in the morning. "Anything on Clara?" He sounded spooked. "There's no record of her, Amos. No birth, no school, no hospital. I even checked adoption logs. It's like she was never there." "What about Margot?" He hesitated. "There's something strange with her death certificate." I leaned forward. "How strange?" "The coroner signed off as suicide, but there's a second version, unofficial, filed 3 days later." "And?" "It says unknown trauma. That's it, no cause of death, no toxicology report, just a stamped file with the city's seal, and no signature." I was quiet for a long time. Then, "Send me everything." Click. By noon, I had a new theory. Margot hadn't jumped. She'd been silenced. And Clara, maybe she hadn't disappeared at all. Maybe she'd never really been seen to begin with. I went back to the Blythe house. Room 5B was as I left it. Quiet, watchful. I descended the trapdoor again, flashlight trembling, dust rising. And then I heard it. A voice. A hum. Faint, not from above, not from behind. From inside the wall. I pressed my ear against the concrete. The sound stopped. Then, tap, tap, tap. 3 knocks from the inside. I staggered back. My flashlight flickered once, then went out completely. And in the pitch black beneath that forgotten house, a child's whisper curled around my ear like a ribbon made of ice. "Don't open the wall. He's still in there with me. I don't rattle easily. Comes with the job." But that whisper, that voice in the dark saying he's still in there with me, shook something deep inside me. Not fear exactly, not surprise. It was recognition. I scrambled back up the stairs from the trapdoor, slammed it shut, and leaned against the wall, breathing hard. The house was silent again, but it wasn't empty. Whatever was beneath that floor hadn't finished speaking. I needed air. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the sky hung low like a secret waiting to be confessed. I sat in my car, lit a cigarette with trembling fingers, and replayed the sound in my mind. A whisper, a girl, a warning, and a name I didn't have yet. Who was he? Back at my office, I spread everything I had across the desk. Margot's original case notes. The photo of Clara. The trapdoor layout. The altered death certificate. Then I noticed something I hadn't before. The second death file, the one Reese sent me, was filed by a man named Dr. Corbin Hales, not a city coroner, a private doctor, former psychiatrist. I called Reese again. "Get me everything on Corbin Hales," I said. It took 2 hours. Turns out Hales ran a private clinic in the late 1940s. Quiet place outside the city. Specialized in delicate matters, the kind people with power wanted to stay hidden. His clinic had shut down in '48. No reason listed. His last known patient? Margot Blythe. I drove out to the old property. It was half swallowed by trees now. Roof caved in. Windows shattered. But the brass plate still clung to the gate. The Hales Institute for Mental and Emotional Rehabilitation. Inside, I found mold, broken furniture, old charts, and a steel cabinet filled with files scorched at the edges, like someone had tried to burn the place down before they left. I pried open one folder marked MB47. Inside was a doctor's note. Patient reports recurring hallucinations of a child named Clara. Describes her as a voice, a presence, sometimes visible, sometimes not. Patient insists the girl is real, but only appears when the house is closed. Patient grows agitated when told the girl is a fabrication. Symptoms align with trauma, possibly repressed guilt or grief manifesting in dissociative form. Then, scrawled in red ink, "The girl is a fixation. Remove the girl, remove the disorder." And underneath that, a single word, isolate. I left the Hales Institute just before dusk, the last of the sun casting long fingers through the trees like it was trying to pull the place back into the ground. Everything I'd found confirmed what I already suspected. Clara wasn't a case of forgetting. She was a case of erasure. Margot didn't suffer from delusion. She suffered from being believed. And when she spoke of a girl who appeared only when the floor was closed, who whispered things no one could explain, they didn't treat her. They silenced her. I stopped at a diner on the way back, sat in the corner booth and flipped the file open again. The doctor's notes looped over and over in my mind. Remove the girl, remove the disorder. It wasn't psychiatry. It was a warning. I drove straight to Reese's office. He looked like he hadn't slept, and by the time I walked in, neither of us had the energy for pleasantries. "I dug deeper," he said, handing me another manila folder. "Found a court petition sealed under private health records. Took some backdoor favors to get it." Inside was a guardianship order dated June 1947. It named Margot Blythe as the legal guardian of one Clara J., name redacted. "What's with the missing last name?" I asked. "It was removed by court order," he said. "And get this, the petition was filed after Clara disappeared." I read the bottom of the form. Petitioner, Dr. Corbin Hales. My stomach turned. Reese pointed to another file. "One more thing. Property records show that room 5B wasn't part of the original blueprint of the house." "What do you mean?" "I mean, it was added later, secretly. No permit, no plan, just built into the attic space between walls." "By who?" He handed me the last page. Permit contractor C. Hales. Back at Wilmot Avenue, I returned to room 5B with a crowbar, a lantern, and the quiet kind of dread that creeps in just before the truth shows its face. The air below the trapdoor was still, waiting. I descended one step at a time, not with fear, but respect. I reached the bottom and turned toward the wall where the voice had come from. The concrete panel looked ordinary. But it wasn't. I pried at the edge. The brick crumbled, not stone, but a false front. Behind it, something hollow. I pushed the panel aside. Inside was a second chamber. Small, silent. And sitting in the middle of the room, cross-legged on the floor, was a girl. Same red shoes, same blue dress. She looked up at me, smiled, and said, "I knew you'd come." I didn't breathe, didn't blink. The girl, Clara, sat there in the dim glow of my lantern like she'd been waiting 25 years for someone to knock on the right part of the wall. She was small, barefoot now. Her blue dress looked untouched by dust, her hair neatly parted. Her voice wasn't eerie or ghost-like. It was clear, soft, like a lullaby whispered behind a locked door. "You're Amos Lennox," she said. I froze. "How do you know my name?" "You were Margot's friend," she replied. "You listened. I was told you didn't exist." She smiled, almost sadly. That's what they wanted. I stepped inside. The space was tight, barely enough to stand upright. No furniture, no food, just a child's drawing taped to the wall. A stick-figure woman with music notes around her, and beside her, a girl holding a red balloon. "Are you real?" I asked her. She tilted her head. "Do I look like I'm not?" "You haven't aged." She didn't answer that. Instead, she stood. They told her I was a sickness, that I was in her head, but I wasn't. I'm not. "Then what are you?" Clara looked me straight in the eye, and for the first time I saw it, something ancient behind the childlike face. Not evil, not innocent either. "I'm what was left behind," she said. "I'm the part they couldn't erase." I swallowed hard. "Where have you been all this time?" "Here," she said, "in the floor, in the dark. I heard everything. When they gave her the pills. When they told her I was a dream. When she cried every night and still tried to sing." "And the man?" I asked. "The one you said was in here with you?" Clara's voice dropped to a whisper. "He used to come down here. He brought papers. He told me to stop talking to Margot. He said I would go away if she stopped believing in me." "Who was he?" She walked to the wall and placed her hand on it. "He left something here. He thought I wouldn't remember, but I did." I followed her gaze. The corner panel was loose again. Inside, wrapped in canvas, was an old audio reel labeled "Property of Dr. C. Hale's patient, number 47A. Clara looked up at me. "They recorded her. They recorded me." I took the reel carefully. "What do you want me to do with this?" "Play it," she said. "Let them hear. Let them all remember." She stepped back into the shadowed corner and sat. I blinked. She was gone. No sound, no trace, just the drawing on the wall, and the reel in my hands. I climbed the stairs with knees that didn't feel like mine. Because I hadn't just found the girl beneath the floor. I'd been seen by her. And something told me this case had just peeled open the last, darkest layer. It took me 2 hours to find a machine that could play the reel. Reese had one stashed in the back of a university archive, dusty, half-busted, but still humming. We threaded the tape. The room went quiet. Then, click, and a low hiss filled the air. The first voice was Margot's. Soft, shaky, trying to sound brave. She speaks to me, in my sleep, in the floor. She tells me things that haven't happened yet. A pause. Then Dr. Hale's. "And what does she tell you, Margot?" She told me you would try to erase her, that you'd say she's not real. Another pause. Then laughter. Not Margot's. A child's. High-pitched, giggling in the background. She says you're afraid of her. That's why you locked the door. My skin turned cold. Margot's voice again, desperate now. She's not just in my head. She knows you, Corbin. She knows what you did to the others. The children you called imaginary, the ones you never reported. A long silence. Then Hales again, but quieter. Controlled. Margot. We're going to help you, but to do that, we have to silence the part that's hurting you. Clara is a construct. Trauma. Projection. You're not a mother, Margot. You were never pregnant. Margot's voice trembled. But she's real. She's watching us right now. Another laugh. But this time it came through the machine like a ripple through water. Then the tape glitched. The reel spun out, warping. And just before it ended, a voice whispered, not Margot, not Hales. He sealed me in, but I learned to wait. I sat back in the chair, jaw locked. Reese didn't speak. I rewound the tape, played it again. Same voices, same laughter, same warning. We made a copy, hid the original. And then I made a decision. I didn't need more evidence, didn't need more ghosts whispering riddles in locked rooms. I needed to find Corbin Hales. If he was still alive, he'd be in his 80s now. But men like Hales didn't die in daylight. They hid. And if Clara's voice was right, he was still waiting in the dark. Just like her. Corbin Hales wasn't in any phone book. No address, no license, no obituary. But men like Hales always leave trails. They just make sure they're buried deeper than most. I started with professional registries. His license had been revoked in 1950. Official reason: ethical violations and psychiatric malpractice. No further details. Then I found a lead in a nursing journal. An anonymous tip in a 1973 letter to the editor warning that a former doctor operating under a false name was running a restorative private practice out of an abandoned train station in a town no one cared to visit. The name attached: Caleb Holt. An anagram of C. Hales. It took me 3 hours of highway and one broken axle, but I found the place. The town was called Belwick. 4 streets, a diner, and an old freight station overgrown with vines and forgotten by maps. But behind a locked iron door I found a mailbox. And the name etched onto it, barely legible. Dr. Caleb Holt. Consultations by appointment only. I broke in. The inside was a cathedral of dust and rot. Filing cabinets sealed with rust. A faint scent of formaldehyde in the air. And in the back, a room with medical equipment from a war that ended before I was born. An operating table, a chair with restraints. And a single recording device, same model as the one that played Margot's tape. I searched the drawers. Inside one was a box of old photographs, each labeled with a child's first name and a year. Daniel, 1943. Maria, 1944. Clara, 1946. I turned over Clara's. On the back, in shaky handwriting. She knows, she remembers too much. Footsteps echoed down the corridor behind me. I turned, hand on my gun. And there he was. Thin, stooped, but unmistakable. Corbin Hales. His eyes were pale blue, rimmed with age, but behind them burned the same fire I'd heard on the tape. I was wondering, he rasped, when someone would come looking. I raised the photo. You sealed a child in a wall. He smiled faintly. I sealed something much older than that. I stepped closer. Clara was real. She is real, he whispered. Then, eyes wide, And she followed you, didn't she? My blood went cold. She's out now. Hales didn't flinch. He didn't run. He just stood there, thin as bone, like the years had finally caught up and decided to make him finish what he started. She followed you here, he said again. Didn't she? I kept my voice steady. Clara's not a ghost. She's not a hallucination. No, Hales whispered. She's a memory. That's worse. He turned and shuffled to a metal desk, motioned for me to follow. I kept my hand near my holster. She was never meant to survive. She was a construct, he said. Something Margot created in grief. But then the girl persisted, even when Margot was medicated. Even when we told her the child didn't exist, Clara kept coming back. He opened a drawer and pulled out a single photograph. It wasn't Clara. It was a wall, inside room 5B. Scratched into the surface in dozens of jagged, childish letters was a phrase repeated over and over. I am still here. I am still here. I am still here. She was never flesh, Hales said. She was something else, a living echo. I tried to isolate her, to study her, but she wouldn't be contained. I stepped forward. You locked a little girl under a house for years. I locked away whatever she was before she found others to believe in her. He turned back to me, eyes gleaming. And now she has you. The lights flickered. A draft moved through the rusted station like breath from a mouth that hadn't opened in years. Then, the whisper. Not in my ears this time. Inside my mind. He lied. He buried me. He buried all of us. Hales staggered back. No, she promised. She said she'd go quiet. The lights went out. Only silence. And then scratching. From inside the walls. Like dozens of fingernails dragging across plaster. I reached for my flashlight. Its beam flickered and danced across the wall. The scratches weren't old. They were forming. Letters bleeding through cracked paint. He doesn't leave this time. Hales screamed. And then he dropped. No wound, no mark, just silence. His eyes still wide, staring at something I couldn't see. I knelt to check his pulse, nothing. He was gone. I looked back at the wall. The letters were still forming. Clara was writing her final note. And I was the only one left to read it. The scratches stopped. The wall fell silent. Hales lay cold on the floor of the station, his face frozen in that last terrified expression, like he'd seen something just before his heart gave out. Maybe he had. I stayed still, flashlight beam shaking, waiting for the next sound. But there was nothing. No whisper, no child's laughter, no Clara, just the echo of everything she'd left behind. I left Belwick before sunrise. Didn't tell the sheriff, didn't file a report. What would I say? Found a missing girl who never existed. Listened to a dead woman's memories on tape. Watched a man die from the weight of what he once erased. Instead, I drove back to Wilmot Avenue. One last time. Room 5. B was quiet. The trapdoor opened easily. The basement was still, no humming, no footsteps, no drawing on the wall. The secret room, gone. Sealed, like it had never been there at all. I placed the tape reel on the floor where she first spoke to me. A kind of offering. And whispered, "You're free now." No response. But the silence felt different this time. Lighter. Back at my office, I boxed the case. Photos. Tape copy. Clara's file. Margot's letter. All labeled and sealed under a single name. Case 47A, the girl beneath the floor. I locked it away. Some stories don't belong in the newspapers. They belong where someone might one day find them. Someone who listens. It's been weeks. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear the hum. Not in the floor. In my head. Faint. Familiar. A lullaby sung from behind walls. And sometimes, just as I drift off, I hear a child's voice whisper, "Still here?" Maybe Claire was never real. Maybe she was memory made solid, grief that learned to speak. Or maybe she was something else entirely. But one thing's certain. Whatever she was never forgotten.